So okay, so let's just let me just frame it a little bit, and then
Mhm.
so we initially cobbled together an SAT course for it was Alpha School, which I can say publicly because they mention Math Academy a lot. So Alpha School's a very forward leaning private school, I guess, in Texas and other places, but um, they were like, hey, we're trying to prepare students to be able to take the SAT. Can you put together a course? And I was like, yeah, yeah. And said, Alex, can you just take a look at review what is the described skills that are covered in the SAT and take what we have and put it into a single course because otherwise it's spread across geometry and algebra 2 and pre-algebra and it's just sort of like or integrated math. It's like there's no way of like, well, how close are they? Like, I don't know. It's
Yeah.
um, so now at the time Sandy warned me about it. She's like, look, um, are you, is this really going to be a good SAT course? I mean, if you guys, and I said, well, I mean, I think we have all the fundamentals there. It should be fine. And she's like, I don't, she warned, she was going to, and Justin, I think I asked you about it too. I said, what do you, cause you tutored kids in the
Yeah.
SAT for years. And you were like, it's not, it's not totally comprehensive. Yeah, these are the constituent skills that a student is going to need for the SAT that exist in the standard curriculum, whether it's traditional or integrated.
Yeah. Right.
But
If you
I don't.
project the
You're like
SAT
you're
onto the
warned.
standard
You
curriculum,
echo
this is it.
Sandy's warning. Like
But
this
it's
is
not
not
nearly sufficient. Yeah. To like, you can't just come out of that. Our original course that was just based on the standard curriculum stuff. A student can't just take that and then come out like scoring like an 800 on the SAT math.
right.
We had to do there's a lot of stuff outside of the standard curriculum that we were going to have to build in.
And at the time, so Alex, as usual, was had his we had like multiple courses going. So I was
Yeah.
like, Alex, can you put this together? And you're like, okay, what do you want me to do? I'm like, look, can you just you're like fine, and within like a week you just analyze the stuff. You're like, all right, this is what it is, and you're like, yeah, I think it looks good because you were just looking at you weren't analyzing tests, you were just looking at the descriptions of the topics and like I think we got all this stuff and I think it's good. And then maybe it was 6 months later, maybe not even that long. Um, I had a call with Andy Montgomery, who's like head of curriculum or something for Alpha School. Really, really nice guy, really bright guy. I think he's like a PhD in computer science from like Stanford or something. And he's always been like really impressed with Math Academy, and was very he was a supporter, so he's easy to talk to. And he's like, "Listen, Jason, um, you guys have a great reputation, especially on X and things like that. One way to ruin it is to say you have a course that prepares you for something and doesn't." And I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, look, there are we had our students go through the test and they were taking practice tests and we had our team analyze it, and there's just a lot of there are a number of topics or questions that they just really weren't prepared for. And I was like, well, I don't love hearing that, but I appreciate the feedback. And then I remember that Justin, your warning and Sandy's warning, because then I got off the call and I talked to Sandy. She's like, I told you, right? She's like, and I said, well, they wanted something. We had to give them the best thing we had. And she's, but by making it a public course, that exposed us a little bit. And so then I was like, okay, we gotta fix this. This is not cool, right? And it's just one of those things. I just was not paying attention to it. We had too many balls in the air, too many different courses we're working on, too many different tech projects. I just was like, yeah, they're good. They're And then, and I'm sorry this wind up is long, but there's just it's a little bit of a
It's good
little
background. Yeah.
yeah, a little backwards, a little complicated story. But um, and then and then Alex was like, all right, we gotta sort this out. I think after that call, I jumped on with both you guys. I was like, okay, we gotta fix this now. This is a problem. And you're Alex. We started doing some research into it, and we had a guy we had hired who mathematician who was really analyzing past tests and sort of trying to figure out like what was missing, like what were topics, that questions on these exams that students really would not be adequately prepared for. It was sort of like a groping around in a dark room trying to find this stuff. And we went through two guys really. There's a lot of work, and and again, in Alex, you couldn't put your full attention on it because you had, I think probability statistics course, machine learning course, discrete math course, all this other things. So this was just like course number 4 or 5 on your list. And it was just sort of this research project was going on. But at a certain point, it was like, okay, we need to get systematic about this. And we took all 1,500 problems on the public database that the SAT, the College Board publishes. Say these are the 1,500 problems or whatever they are that are representative of the type of problems that are on the exam, and we got systematic about it. And then Alex, that was when the time we started realizing, okay, like what are these topics? Like here are the problems. Here are the harder questions of the SAT. Here are the questions that are in the material we have. What's in that gap? We started referring to that as the missing middle. And so Alex, you and your team started really pushing on that, right? How do we close that gap? I mean, talk a little bit about that process, that finding the missing middle.
Yeah, so it was kind of like a double-pronged approach. So when we had all the kind of the question bank questions, we knew we needed a test prep course, a course that basically had every single type of problem that could come up on the SAT. So okay, we need those questions and we need solutions to those questions. So I sort of set about the process of populating the database with those questions and solutions that are kind of done to our standard and things like that, and kind of like fitting out the missing middle from there, from that end.
But just to be clear, we didn't use those questions. We just used them as a model for the kind of questions, for a class of questions that we would need, right? I mean,
correct. Yeah, that's right. So it's just like, okay, this, yeah, exactly. So, and the solutions were completely ours. We looked at the question stems. It's like, okay, we would make them our own. The solutions were basically completely written by our team. But yeah, so we started sort of populating the system with those kind of like test prep questions and kind of fitting out the missing middle that way. But then Justin needed to get his arms around like the practice test, because as part of the test prep course, we need high fidelity exams. So he started looking at the practice tests, and did a really, really, really thorough job of identifying, okay, this is a missing middle topic, that's a missing middle topic. So over the course of about a week or so, 2 weeks, just did like a missing middle analysis from the point of view looking at the test, the exams. Gave that to me and said, okay, this needs to be in the curriculum. So I was like, okay.
Yeah, because that was phase 2, because you went through phase 1, because you were just looking at the 1,500 problems. You're like, I think we're, and I would periodically ask you, like, are we close? I mean, how many? You're like, well, I think we're maybe 10, 20 topics away or whatever. Like we're getting in, and I kind of mentioned it offhand to Justin, and he's like, I don't know, right? And then
it was when like you had mentioned to me like, hey, it sounds like the SAT course is going to be done next week, and I was just like, my conception of like what this course needs to cover versus the actual exam, just based on tutoring experience, I was like, we're 1 week away. That does not. It sounds like there should be more on it. So
that's what got you to start looking at it. I said, well, we'll go take a look at some practice exams and see. Like, and then you went and looked at all the practice exams, and then you dug in and you went and looked for published exams or old exams that have been cobbled together by people who remembered certain questions and then just kind of right or something like that.
Well, they have official. The SAT had released official exams for years past that you can. access.
Okay. So it was that plus the practice exam. So give a huge range of questions, which sort of there's a different emphasis or different types of problems than were on the the question bank, right?
Yeah, turns out the question bank was incomplete in coverage.
Right. Right. So Alex, how many topics do you say missing middle topics? And when I say missing middle topics, it was not just like one topic bridge. Sometimes it would be a whole sequence of topics to bridge the gap, because it was obviously, so if you had the questions on the SAT, the hardest questions, it was sort of like we were closer and further on certain topics. And so you had to bridge that. Sometimes it was one or two topics. Sometimes it was a whole sequence of or cluster of scaffolding that had to be built up for a student would be able to have a reasonable chance of solving a problem in the time allotted, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the end it ended up being about 115 new topics is what we added. A lot of them is a lot.
Yeah.
It is a lot. The biggest area was like the descriptive statistics stuff. There's quite a lot. So it's you know, on the SAT, there's quite a lot of emphasis on you know, sort of analyzing different types of data sets, and some of the problems are quite challenging. And there was a lot of missing middle stuff that we needed to add for that. I don't think we really had enough coverage. Just even just considering the regular curriculum in let alone the.
But it was across the board. That was just our weakest area. Descriptive statistics was a obvious, a clear weak point, but it was like everywhere. Quadratics, analyzing quadratic systems, equations, geometry.
Just for listeners, 115 topics. Compare that to our Algebra 1 course has what, like 200-ish topics?
220,
like, so,
something like that.
220. So this is about half of like a full length, full school year course.
Right.
That's a lot of stuff. Yeah. So right. So you're saying there's descriptive statistics. What else? What else was in there?
That was so. What I tended to find is that it was. A lot of the stuff, it was kind of like on the periphery. I mean, the descriptive statistics stands out because it was just such a huge amount of stuff. And that's kind of what so when we said we were kind of done with the question bank, it was like, that's as far as we kind of got. It's like, we need a ton of this stuff. And because it's graphs and tables and things like that, and we need lots and lots of topics, kind of a lot of the attention was kind of focused on that for a little while, just kind of getting that in place. Aside from that, it was kind of just stuff like almost like one or two topic extensions of things we already had. That was the vast majority of the cases. Like, okay, you cover this, but you don't cover it to the point where someone who is using this to prepare for the SAT is going to see that question and go, yeah, oh yeah, I know how to do this, you know. I got some examples which are kind of I've written down, which I thought were quite interesting. So things like we got a lot of stuff had a lot of stuff in the system on like exponential models, but things like sort of, you know, shifting units of time, you know, going from hours to days and things like how does that affect the model, and percentage increase and decrease that are kind of related. But that was one area that I thought was that was one.
Yeah, that's not a straight up unit conversion. That's because the time is in the exponent of the exponential model, right? So you have to. It's not just just multiply this by like 365 days in a year. No, there's you have to use exponent rules and stuff like that to actually make this conversion, because it's in a kind of complicated setting.
Yes, exactly. And, you know, I think, and there's one which, there was one type of topic which was quite exclusive to the SAT. I've never seen it anywhere else before. Like, and that, again, exponential functions. Like, you know, you called it riddles when you first did your analysis.
Yeah, because I didn't have a good name. I was like, what the hell is this? Like, why would anyone? Okay, fine. All right. This is basically a riddle. It's just worded intentionally confusingly to try to throw somebody off, but yeah.
So I really wanted to keep that name because I thought it was great, but I thought when we got kind of down to the crux of it, it's like, okay, what this really is taking an exponential model and kind of rewriting it so that, you know, you subtract one in the exponent, but that affects the constant, so the constant can reveal different parts about the function itself. And it's like, yeah, we didn't really have that, like, you know, sort of flipping between one type of exponential model and another, and how that is related to how the constants are related to the model itself, what it reveals. So it's like, yeah, that's quite niche. And there was some really nasty questions on the exam. So again, it was just kind of like it's just one or two topics that had to be added onto all the exponential function stuff to make sure they can do that. But it needed to be there, because if you see that for the first time in the exam, or you start doing practice exams, you're hit with these all the time. It's quite a frequent type of question. It's going to be it's going to be pretty brutal if you haven't had like explicit instructions to what the hell is actually going on. Yeah, some of those quadratic ones, like, sort of, I mean, the curriculum had all the stuff about, plotting, finding roots of quadratics, finding the sort of the vertex and all those kinds of things. But thinking about, so almost like, again, like riddle type questions, what these properties are true. What does that tell you about the relationship between the coefficients? And so that all had to be included. And some things like, some question, actually probably one of my favorites I think that we did add was, again, I saw it on the SAT quite a lot, which was like, they give you quite a verbose description of some sort of physical phenomena like electric flux density or something like that. And bottom line is that the kids taking this aren't necessarily physicists. They might not know, have the faintest idea what the hell you're talking about. So it's like, okay,
they may not have even taken a single physics course. Flux, they might have no idea what that even is.
Exactly. So it's like, okay, so we need a topic that basically explains all this physics stuff to non-physicists. I mean, not that we necessarily explain what electric flux density is. It's getting to the crux of what's this trying to ascertain the student is able to do. It's like, take this complex description, sort of highlight the really important parts, use that to write down a formula, check, do like a unit check, almost like a sanity check. Okay, the units balance, that means that the formula looks like it's good to go, and then kind of do some kind of manipulation. So we're not trying to create like mini physics experts here. It's just that one skill. Take an unfamiliar concept that's presented in that very, very wordy kind of form, extract out the useful information and work with it.
Well, you know what's interesting about this is because a lot of students don't take physics, right? They take biology and chemistry and maybe take 2 years of chemistry, take basic chemistry, and they take AP chemistry. They don't even take physics. And so it's sort of an unreasonable questions to ask in a lot of ways, because it disadvantages anyone who hasn't happened to have taken physics. But I feel like it's sort of like a assessment by correlation. So students who've taken physics and can remember the physics are probably stronger students, and they do better at this, and they score high. You know what I mean? It's this kind of bullshit, advantage that you're giving,
Yeah, and it's enough. It's like you can hide behind the idea that like, oh, well, they don't have to know physics. It's about parsing a unfamiliar word out of a problem statement and like spinning like, just based on the description, figuring out what's relevant on the fly. But yeah, the truth is, if you have seen this word before, if you have just in a couple problems, or you don't have to be like an expert on it, but if you have exposure to it before, then you're at a big advantage. If you know that flux it really just comes down to like the amount of like force field lines going through a geometric surface area. You already have in your head like, oh, this is really about surface area, right? Like, whereas somebody who's never ever seen that before, they're like, flux, is that like, what does that have to do with length, surface area, volume? They don't even know what's important. So seeing it before kind of tips you off. It helps you leverage this strategy of knowing what's important, because your priors in your head are all shifted.
Yeah, and they're going to be, it's going to, if you're not familiar, what's really going to throw you off, you're going to be like, oh crap, right? Could freak out a little bit. Like, am I supposed to know what flux is?
Yeah.
Wait, I don't know what flux is. It's not like, and I don't think most people say, well, they're going to use some physics stuff you're not going to know. And just what we want you to do is just go with the description and don't think about it. But I don't think what most students are expecting. It's just unfair. So Alex, you had to build up a whole mini curriculum within the math fundamentals course, SAT math fundamentals course, that gave a range of these types of problems, because there are lots of different versions of this, right? So it wasn't just like, well, it's just density or just flux. There were just different. So you had to kind of do enough range so they could get comfortable with a lot of different words and terminology and constants and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, like very, very, very finely scaffolded. So, just the ability to kind of like, given a wide range of context, just to do that, read the description and write down appropriate formula. And then the next step will be, okay, you do that, but then you have to manipulate the formula. And then the next step will be, okay, then we've got this one, which is kind of like a rate of change. So you have to kind of spot that, Hooke's law is not about the extension. It's not about the length of the spring. It's the extension of the spring. So you have to recognize that is referring to like some change in the length of the spring. So we had a few topics that basically I think did a pretty good job at kind of like closing the gap. And I think that's what the missing middle is designed to do, exactly that, is to close the gap between a regular curriculum and like what is actually needed for this for the test prep to be successful on the exam. I was going to say something about that now. So it's a little bit like there's two things I was going to say. So it's a little, the difference between the fundamentals course and the test prep course. I kind of imagine it a little bit like imagine you're like a professional boxer. And you haven't got a fight lined up, but you're a professional boxer. This is what you do for a living, so you need to be sort of showing up to the gym every single day, training your ass off, making sure you're working on your footwork, on your strength, on your endurance, on your jab, on all your punches and stuff like that. So just general all-round conditioning and fitness. That's what the fundamentals course does. It just kind of gets you to the point where you're
and the fundamental boxing skills, right? The fundamental
yes, exactly, absolutely. The fundamental boxing
skills. How to move and in punch and whatever, all that stuff. These are a lot of skills that they're working on, but they're not sparring.
Yeah, they're not exactly training for a specific opponent. So it's like, so then like next day you go is, okay, we've got a fight lined up. It's a guy who's from X place. He's a southpaw. He's tall. He's fit. He's strong. So that's the point where you kind of got all your fundamentals nailed, and you're then preparing for that specific opponent. So there's certain things you want to sort of like lean into, focus more on, just to make sure you're as prepared as you can be for that opponent. So that opponent is like
it's like a fight strategy, right? So this is
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, it's like if you're going up against Mike Tyson, are you just gonna not look at his like previous fight videos? You're just gonna do your normal workout routine and then just show up like it could be anyone steps in the ring? Like, no, you're gonna actually like look, what does he do? How does he lean? Where when he throws punches, are there any like weak points exposed more often than you would see in other opponents? You're kind of studying him before you step into the ring with him, because otherwise you're just gonna get your ass kicked.
Right.
And that he's doing that to you also.
Right. This is true of all sports. So whether you're, especially at college and professional level, they break down tape. They spend hours and hours and hours a week watching tape of upcoming opponents. Right. And so, when if they're playing in the NFL and you're playing on another football team, American football, then you're trying to figure, they're a run first offense, or they're a pass first offense, or they have these kind of, secondary, and they have strengths and weaknesses and things that they want to do. And then teams that have put up either beat them or taken away some things, how do they do it? What can we learn from that? So you really, you start preparing for that team. Now the best athletes would do that on their own. Like I think Dennis Rodman, who played for Detroit back many, many years ago. We did play for Detroit, but didn't play for the Bulls. And he was like this incredible rebounder in basketball, right? And played the NBA. And I think I read something where he would spend hours and hours and hours watching how these other big men from these other teams would rebound. And he would also have, where were certain shooters, when they would shoot, where their ball would tend to go off the glass. So he would position himself under the basket, because there's a bigger tendency when this guy shoots, it goes short and it tends to fall short. So I want to be in that, or it tends to go long and so it bounces to the side. So he would do all these things. He'd learn how the other big men and the other team would position themselves, so he would be and have a more leveraged position. And then he would understand also the tendency of whoever's shooting, where the ball would tend to go. And so you add up all these little advantages, and then he was like this unbelievably good rebounder. But anyway, so same goes in all sports. It's like, okay, you get your fundamentals in place. Now it's time to game plan, strategize, come up with, and start doing the things you need to do to maximize your performance on the day of the event.
Yeah.
So, well, it's interesting. One thing I want to say, though, so I think it's a really cool way of thinking about it. I hadn't really thought about it in that way, but I remember one analogy I used sometimes I think of analogies. I always think of almost like stories. I actually watched a movie, right? And so I was talking about the missing middle, and I said, imagine, because we were first talking about this. I said, okay, imagine that you hired this really high-priced SAT tutor, $200 an hour, some crazy amount, and this guy delivers results. And people say, if you can hire this guy, worked with my son or with my daughter, and had this incredible results. And so you meet this guy and you're like, so what do you do that's so special? And he's like, well, I've done this for a long time. I've analyzed all the tests. I analyze where these students, first I give these students a really in-depth assessment so I really understand their strengths and weaknesses. And so the first thing we do is remediate all of those things. That's obviously what they would do. And then what I do is I've developed, there's typically a lot of missing skills between the harder questions on the SAT and then what the students have covered in school. And I've developed my own materials over the past 10 years, where I have, that I have been teaching students, okay, they need to do this and they got to do this and I'm going to build on that. And so I call my golden topics. So I have this whole thing, and you're sitting there as a parent, you go, wow, the golden topics. Like, what are those golden topics? And he's like, he pulls out his like a little, and he has like some booklet that he's put together. And it's like, okay, we cover all this exponential stuff and the scripted, like just Alex, what you're talking about. And so we got to come up with these golden topics that is sort of this area. These things are not covered. They're not covered in the normal curriculum. They're not even covered in the SAT prep books because there's not enough room. They give mostly practice tests and fundamentals. But somebody's taken the time to really do this so that they can systematically level up his clients, these students, so they have incredible results, which means he can command a huge, tutoring fee and get incredible word of mouth, because the results are really going to dictate how successful his tutoring business is. And so he spent years fine tuning these golden topics, so that's essentially what this process of identifying the missing middle or identifying the golden topics, right? So it's like, because I was like, I remember when I was I kind of mentioned a version of this story to you guys in passing. I said, just imagine, what would those topics be? What would they be? And you're like, you start thinking like, right? And that kind of it gives you a little visualization, like, oh, I think I know. Like, what would give you an unfair advantage, right? And so that was another thing I tend to do with Justin. I've done this a few times with you. We played this little game and I'm like, should we do X or Y or whatever? And you're like, well, I don't know. It makes a difference. Okay, let me put it this way. What if I could do this and then you couldn't? Would that be unfair? And you're like, I'm like, well, okay, then let's do that. Right? Like doing this, would you be pissed if we had a competition and I get $1 million and you don't because I get to do this? You're like, well, yeah, okay, well then let's do that. Because
I think the way you frame it sometimes that is the most punchy is when you say something like, okay, if there were a competition and you win like $1 billion, if you win this competition, what would you do? Would you just like, is this a strategy that you would bring to the competition, or is there anything else that you would do to maximize your chance of winning? And then when you think of it like that, or I mean, you can also flip it on the other hand, like the tutoring the bloodthirsty king's kid, where if the king is unimpressed, he's gonna have your head chopped off. Like if you take that to the SAT setting of like, okay, if this king's kid doesn't get a sky high score on the SAT, like your life is done. Is there anything else that you would do to potentially save your life here? I mean, if there's not, then okay, but like, is there anything else? Is this your infinite accountability, infinite reward strategy? Because if it's not, then we need to go figure out what that strategy is and do that instead.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's funny actually. There was the process of like identifying the missing middle, I suppose, is one of those things that it took a while for us to kind of really home in on. Okay, this is how you do it. There was a good analogy when we were talking a little while ago about I'm almost like the admiral of the Navy, and Justin is kind of like special ops.
He's special. So it was a great analogy. Yeah, it's funny. I was going to tell that story. Yeah,
it's a brilliant analogy because we did actually have like a few people that basically their task was to go and analyze, find out what the missing middle was. I mean, this was like months ago. And the thing is that unless you've got a very extremely comprehensive idea of what the hell it is we're actually doing here, it's very hard to kind of explain that to someone in like a couple of meetings. Obviously, like just someone like, and it's hard for me to, because I'm admiral of this Navy fleet, you know, kind of thing.
Well, you have a huge team of, I don't know, 25, 30, whatever many it is. It's always a little bit flex, but you have a big team of people, of editors and reviewers and question writers and all these different skill sets and levels of responsibility that you have to manage, and you have to keep this entire fleet moving together with some level of synchronicity to make it efficient. So when I come in and say, "Hey, Alex, I think we need to do X," you're just like, "What?" You know, right? And I do that probably a lot more than you'd like, but sometimes like, "Hey, we got stop, we got to do this other thing," and so you got to turn around the whole thing. We got a whole battle plan. We got Navy. We got this. We got these certain ships are going in to repair, and then we got to pull in, and you don't understand. There's a whole orchestration, a whole coordination thing, and so which happens when you have lots of people who are distributed all around the world, who have very particular skill sets and very particular sets of responsibilities. And, you know, I come in and I'm like, "Hey, I was thinking about something this morning in the shower." And you're like, "Oh, God."
Well, the funny part is like sometimes these things are like, they're not immediately obvious that they're huge gain, right? They're just something that's like, that's a little weird. We should look into that. And it was one of those things, you said this before when you were telling the story, which I think you should tell the story, but it's like you came to Alex and you're like, "Hey, I think there's a giant squid at the bottom of the ocean."
Yeah.
So, it's just he's like, "Really? You want me to put everything on hold just for this giant squid?" Okay, you tell this story, because
this was about the problems. So once we got to the test prep course, the idea was that we would bin certain categories of questions. So you have like, 40, 50, 80 bins or something. So we have 20 bins of geometry questions, and we have different types of questions within each bin that are in a certain type of a category, and we have levels of difficulty. And it was like, okay, and Alex like, "Look, we can categorize this, and we can put them in a related category, and then we can kind of calibrate the student's strength in each one, and then they can work on the level they need to." And that was like, because there's a certain problem solving ability that they'll just develop as they get more exposure to a certain class of problems within a category. And I don't know why I started thinking, I was like, is there a hierarchy? I mean, is there a hierarchy more than just like they go up? It's like they play in. There's like is there a knowledge graph there? And I remember, Alex, I asked something to you, and you're like, because Justin, you thought the same thing for a year. Because I'd be like, "Tell me about the SAT. Could we scaffold that whole thing?" And you're like, "Jace, I don't know. That'd probably 300-400 topics. It's so sparse. There's such huge variance. You just cannot scaffold it like you can Algebra 1 or calculus."
There were two questions. The first question is, can it be scaffolded? Is it, in theory, like, is there a structure here? Question number two is, can we enumerate it and not have it blow up into like hundreds or like 500, 1,000 top? Like, how big is this? And so, yeah, I was very much in the camp of like, I know there's structure here, but I don't know if it's feasible for us to enumerate every single little thing.
Because I asked this multiple times. I mean, I have a habit of asking the same question many times to explore it. I'm like, "So Justin, I know I've asked you this before, and I'll say it all day. Like, okay, let's go with me on this. Is this?" And it would tend to get the same answer. Like, you'd be like, "Jason, I hear what you're saying. I just think there's too much. It's just too sparse. It's not feasible to scaffold it. It's just not in the structure." Anyway, so that was where we all kind of sat with it. And I can't remember why I started. I was like, I feel like there's some more structure there. Because if you create structure, you get efficiency, right? And it allows you to compress the information. Therefore, the learning efficiency is higher because you're not wasting time on things that you don't need to, and you're focused more on things that you need to learn, and then you can pull that forward. And so, and Alex, I think I brought up to you initially, and you were just like, "What?" And
I was
so
extremely skeptical.
you were extremely skeptical, and I think probably annoyed. Although you probably hit it, you're just like, probably went to Kremi, and you're just like, Jason, fucking Jason. And so I go, and so here's the analogy I use. I said, it's like I say, hey, I think there might be. I've been reading some stuff. I think giant squids are probably real. And you're like, what? like, no, I'm serious. I think, look, I know it sounds kind of out there, but I think there's a lot of evidence that giant squids are a real species or family of, of animals that are down. And I think really giant squids. And you're just like, okay, whatever. You basically, I don't, I'm the Admiral Navy. I don't have time to play around with you. I don't like, we're going to go look for giant squid. And I go, Justin, do me a favor. I was like, I think there's some giant squids down there. Take your team, take your boat, go out there. I want you just humor me and go down. And so you went down, you went your submerged, put your guys down, and you come back and I'm like, so? And you're like, dude, I'm like, what? And he's like, well, one guy's has the bends. He's unconscious. The other guy is in shock and is talking, and they won't even say it. And then we have a picture of like a giant eye, and like, I'm like, really? I'm like, really? Like, yeah. So the guy's like, there's a giant squid down there, man. And so, because what I'd ask you to do is, I said, there was like a set of topics or something. There's some category where that would be in a bin. I said, is there structure here? Right. And then I can't remember what the topics were. And then you went and found it and you said, holy crap. Like there was just perfect structure. Right.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like, the first time you go through these topics, maybe the structure doesn't jump out at you, but once that's kind of consolidated in your brain, you take a second look, it jumps out more. It's like rereading an essay, sort of. Like you write the essay, it's 2 a.m, you think this essay is great, and you read it again at like 10 a.m. the next morning, you're like, wow, okay, there's improvements that I can make. And then now you think it's perfect, and then you do it again the next day, and then more stuff jumps out at you. And eventually it gets to the right level, but it's one of those things where sometimes in order to really see the structure, you have to try your best, let that sit in your brain, consolidate overnight, and look at it again the next day. It's not always easy to see the structure that jumps out.
What were the topics? Do you remember? Do you have the top of your head? I mean, it's been a while. Maybe.
I think
it was something in algebra, I think. Alex, did you remember?
Yeah, I think it was some like linear equations, but with progressing levels of difficulty, which I think I just sort of dumped it into one topic with some kind of it had like sort of like 18 knowledge points or something like that. And I think I give that to you, and you was like, we could split this. I think I recognized some structure and you recognize more, and then we kind of inferred that there's just structure everywhere.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So the thing is like, I was just skeptical that there wasn't structure. I just didn't believe it. Now, it was just an instinct. It was just an intuition. Well, obviously, I didn't have any hard evidence. I was just like, this doesn't seem right to me. I just don't believe it. And, Justin, you not having an entire fleet under your command, you're just you're just like, all right. So you're like, all right, so you want me to just spend the weekend? Just go do this. Like, put everything on hold. I want to answer this question. Because if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, right? If there's no giant squid, if there's no way to scaffold this stuff, then screw it, right? At least I'll quit having this nagging question in the back of my head. But if my instinct is right and there is structure, then we got a whole lot of opportunity here. And so you came back, we're like, yeah, holy crap. And then you looked at it more and you're like, oh my God, like it was like a multiple phase thing where you're just like, oh my God, right?
Yeah. Well, it was, it was really coming face to face with the manifold hypothesis playing out again. The manifold hypothesis being that like all of life is just in this very high dimensional space, right? There's like tons and tons of possibilities of things that in theory could potentially happen. But the things that actually happen lie on a much lower dimensional subspace within that space. And so it's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, based on the SAT, based on all these foundational skills, they can be pulled together in so many different ways. I mean, you can do the calculation. Let's say you have like 100 sub skills, 200 sub skills, and you're computing how many different combinations of 3 or 4 of those sub skills. I mean, you get an astronomically large number. And it's just something where it's like, okay, well, there's no way that we're going to hit all of these combinations. But once you actually look at the exam and you see these combinations that show up over and over again, it's a much, much smaller space. It's not this astronomically large number. It's a large number. I mean, it's like, what, like 115 missing middle topics. I mean, it's not a trivially small number, but like you can do it if you're willing to put in some elbow grease and do the work. You can turn this into a legitimate, highly scaffolded course that can take a student, even a student who's not a particularly mathematically gifted. You can get them to fill in a lot of these gaps that a lot of genius students are just kind of inferring on the fly. You can make that explicit for them and scaffold them through that process and get them to, at least in the subset of knowledge that is covered on the SAT, you can get them highly trained on that.
Yeah. So that was interesting. So when you came back and you figured this stuff out, and then we had a conversation with Alex, and you were like, okay, right? It was you saw what the research, the little proof of concept stuff that Justin had done, and you're like, that's pretty convincing, right? And so that's when you said, all right, well, let me start looking at this, and you started going down that rabbit hole yourself, right? And trying to find structure in these things, then having the team help you with.
Yeah, that's right. So so I was convinced after Justin's research, and I thought, yeah, I think we can make this work. And I can also see advantage. Obviously, we've got a really efficient system, so it's beneficial to try and work with the existing infrastructure that we have if we can get it to work. So I was like, okay, that's really motivating. And yeah, the research that Justin did made me convince me. So yeah, so that was the point where I got like the rest of the team involved in terms of organizing all like these, I mean, what was that, sort of 1,500, 1,700 questions. By this point, they actually had like 10 of each type. So it's kind of like 17,000 questions.
It's like an archaeological expedition. It's like I found the head of the T-Rex.
Yeah.
Like, of course, there's the rest of the T-Rex here. Look at the whole team excavating this. Like, we can bet on the rest of the fossil team.
Yes, exactly. So it was kind of that. It was just okay. We're gonna make this work as best as we possibly can. So I got some like the top guys on the team, sort of like helping me with the actual structuring. So basically categorizing all these different questions into hierarchies and individual topics. Do what we usually do, sort of 3 or 4 knowledge points each. So all grouped by sort of like with hierarchy into topic hierarchy too. So increasing difficulty as you go through the topic, and it worked. And we managed to map out the entire bank of questions that we had into a hierarchy, complete with proper topics. All the prerequisite relationships between them. I mean, the knowledge graph is still pretty flat, as you would kind of expect, but there is a lot of structure there. I mean, was it sort of 5 or 6 layers deep? And bearing in mind, of course, is that the whole point of the fundamentals course is to make sure is to get people to the point where they can really answer most of these questions already. So once they've completed, because what we do is we're not going to allow anyone to sort of take the fundamentals, to take the test prep course until they've completed the fundamentals course. So
you can only be promoted into it after you've completed. You can't just sign up to it.
Yes, exactly. And but so that means they're in pretty good shape by the time they're hitting the test prep course. So, so they should kind of place out of a large part of it, which means although we have like something like 250, 300 topics in our test prep course, they're going to be kind of hovering around the leaf nodes where all the sort of the kind of tricky, the harder problems are, where there's sort of the middle, the distance between where the fundamentals course finishes and the test prep course sort of starts, if you like, which is kind of a thin layer relative to the rest of the course. So yeah, it's to work, and that was the point where me as sort of Navy commander had to go kind of like incommunicado for like 3 weeks just to kind of like weave all these topics together, in terms of like getting the knowledge graph structure in place. It's one thing to have the topics, but then you've actually got to get all kind of like the knowledge graph and all the data correct for that, which the team helped a lot with, but yeah, a lot of it is stuff only I can do.
Did
Yeah, I
you?
remember
Yeah,
you
so-
messaged me that weekend where you were like, "Man, I just like finished like setting all these like prerequisites and stuff. I think I'm just gonna lie down in a dark room for a little bit." I think that's you said something like that. I was like, "Yeah, it sounds about right." It must have been a ton of work.
Part of what we kind of came to realize as we identified this structure, and because even as we were going to, because I think I'd asked Justin at some point, even after we realized that there was structure there, I was like, how much space beyond, once we scaffold this stuff all the way, how much problem solving is left? Like, is there, we're going to get ourselves because I said maybe we only get ourselves 75% or 80%, 85. That's still a huge win if we can scaffold, in the missing middle and in the test prep, but maybe there's just 10, 15% that's just problem solving that, it's just going to be sort of inefficient, but you're just going to have to do a lot of problems in a certain category and hope that you sort of pull together some skills. And I said, what percent? And you're like, I don't think there's anything left. I mean, I think we've closed the gap. It's like an airlock. There's no
Yeah.
problem solving required. We totally full cover.
Yeah, we've enumerated it. How well did we enumerate it? 100%. Like there's no like what do you mean we have to like think about like getting to the off manifold stuff? No, we got the manifold. It's it. We excavated it, the full thing, all the bones. We got all all the ribs of the T-Rex, everything. There's nothing to fill in. it's all there.
No interpolation required. It's
Yeah.
nothing left. So which raised an interesting question, which was like, okay, well, if we could do this with the SAT, and then I'm sure you do the ACT. I mean, can you do it with his AMC questions? Can you do? I mean, is all these things? It's like, well, it's problem solving. It's like, and I started to thinking maybe problem solving was just a word for I don't know. I haven't enumerated. I don't really know. It's problem solving, right? Whereas like, okay, again, and I think Justin, this is where we had the discussion was, okay, you can only do problem solving. I get to enumerate who wins. And you're like, well, enumerating creating the scaffolded approach. Okay. So then the question is, how well can you enumerate it? Like, is it like, okay, yeah, you can enumerate it, but it's infeasibly large, so that's not possible. But that was kind of where we started the question of, or sort of the idea of the unreasonable effectiveness of a knowledge graph. Because if you can enumerate a knowledge space, a domain with a knowledge graph, then it removes this dark areas. It's like you totally flood the room with light. They're no longer dark areas. It's like problem solving. It's not.
This is almost like the thermodynamics of knowledge acquisition in the sense that, okay, the work has to be done for the student to acquire knowledge. But the knowledge graph, it's this trick that allows you to trade off student work for instructor work. Instead of having the student just like go through this hodgepodge of problems and hopefully they can infer all the structure and just have them grind through a large enough volume that they can infer. What you do is you say like, okay, well, we'll just have the instructor or the content, the system. We're going to work on the system, figure this all out behind the scenes. This is not going to take up your time as a student. We're going to have this all ready for you, get the structure, present you with the structure. It doesn't mean that there's less work that has to happen. But there's less work for the student. We have to do more of the work, but that's the trick. And we can do our work at scale versus the student. Is just
imagine it like, you can almost imagine it like this: like you're in a building, and there are no stairs or elevators, and the only people who can get to the top have to be on belay. And they have to kind of go up, and you have to be pretty athletic and in pretty good shape, and it's a lot of damn work to get to the top. You're just using like you're like some kind of rock climber, and you're like, oh, we're just going to build up stairs, It's like you still got to walk up the stairs. You maybe take a break, so kind of hard, but there's each step is the same distance, and just step, 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 platform, step, step, step. And so it's like, yeah, you don't have. I mean, you can't be like 90 years old and get to the top of this 80-story building, probably. But as long as you're in reasonable shape and you're willing to walk up the stairs, anyone can do it. And that's, I think, the sort of unreasonable effectiveness of knowledge graph. So, Alex, I know you had some things to say about it. So.
Yeah. So one thing I think that something occurred to me quite recently, really, is that I mean the great thing about having a knowledge graph and is that it's a very strict implementation of mastery learning. So we don't let you do topic X unless you have mastered or at least proficient in all of the prerequisites for topic X. So you have to have demonstrated that. Now, as curriculum designers, especially when we're looking at some of these kind of like missing middle topics or test prep topics, one thing it's really where I think is really powerful is it allows you to kind of include all those really subtle prerequisites that could easily slip under the radar. But if you're just analyzing these problems really carefully, so that's a really important prerequisite. I'm going to make sure that is a prerequisite of this topic, which means the student is prepared with all the necessary prerequisites before they even see the topic. I mean, there was one particular type of question on the SAT which was to do with finding like I think it was like the smallest difference between the mean of one data set and the median of another data set. And there's a whole bunch of like really quite subtle prerequisites that are required to answer that question. Like, how do you find the smallest value of a difference? It's like something students need explicit practice on, and you just explain that. And it's also even like function composition turned out to be a prerequisite. Again, it's like you by having these very, very highly scaffolded, highly enumerated areas of knowledge, each with their own sort of like what we call key prerequisites, you can capture the essence of every single problem that you want the student to face. And it's like, they're not going to see that problem unless they've mastered the prerequisites, even those ones that are kind of very likely to slip through the radar in like a regular setting or whatever. So and I think that's the further we go into like competition math and things like that, I think that kind of like encapsulating those really subtle key prerequisites is going to be really, really helpful thing for us in terms of getting the student to the point where they can answer these questions, and we're confident they have the prerequisite knowledge. Another thing, of course, just by simply enumerating all the prerequisites, you can kind of say to yourself, well, hang on, this topic's got 15 prerequisites. That's way too much. That's cognitive overload, huge issue right there. This needs to be split up, organized in a different way. So having that information just in front of you allows you to plan, to take all the things we know about the science of learning into account, incorporate all those sort of subtle prerequisites so that the student is not struggling at any point. Now, how far we can push that with competition math, AMC, and all that stuff remains to be seen. I think we've got bigger tests ahead than the SAT, but I think the SAT has given us a very, very solid base from which to see how far we can really push this idea.